In the summer of 1997, 17-year-old Michael Turner lived with his parents in a small town in rural Indiana, USA. Their farmhouse sat at the edge of a massive forest that stretched for miles. The woods had a dark reputation among locals. For decades, people claimed to hear screams, see strange lights, and encounter shadowy figures between the trees after sunset. Most residents dismissed the stories as campfire legends, but there was one story nobody liked to discuss. In 1972, a young woman named Rebecca Lawson disappeared while hiking through those woods. Despite one of the largest search operations in the county's history, neither Rebecca nor any trace of her was ever found. 25 years later, Michael and his friends often joked about the old mystery. One August evening, they decided to camp deep inside the forest to prove there was nothing to fear. As darkness fell, the atmosphere changed. The woods became unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, no movement. Around midnight, one of Michael's friends noticed a faint light moving between the trees. At first, they thought it was another camper, but the light seemed to float above the ground. It would appear, disappear, and then reappear farther away. Curiosity overcame fear, and the teenagers followed it deeper into the forest. After nearly 30 minutes of walking, they reached a clearing they had never seen before. In the center stood an abandoned wooden cabin covered in vines and rot. None of them had ever heard of a cabin existing in that part of the forest. The boys approached cautiously. The structure looked decades old and appeared ready to collapse. Inside, dust covered every surface. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. Yet something felt wrong. The cabin looked abandoned, but it didn't feel empty. Michael noticed an old photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the face in the picture. It matched photographs he had seen of Rebecca Lawson, the missing hiker from 1972. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, a loud bang echoed from the back room. The sound was so sudden and violent that everyone jumped. One of the boys screamed and ran outside. The others followed. As they reached the tree line, Michael glanced back toward the cabin. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure, dressed in dark clothing. It appeared unnaturally thin, motionless, and impossibly pale in the moonlight. The figure did not move or speak. It simply watched them. Terrified, the boys ran through the woods until they reached their truck. None of them spoke during the drive home. The next morning, Michael convinced his father and several local residents to return to the cabin. What they found shocked everyone. The clearing was there, but the cabin was gone. There was no foundation, no debris, no evidence that any structure had ever existed. The adults accused the boys of making up stories, but Michael knew what he had seen. Over the following weeks, strange things began happening around his home. He would wake in the middle of the night to find muddy footprints outside his bedroom window. The family dog refused to go near the forest and would growl at the tree line every evening. Then came the whispers. Several times, Michael heard someone softly calling his name from outside the house after midnight. Whenever he looked, nobody was there. One night, he finally worked up the courage to investigate. Carrying a flashlight, he followed the voice into the woods. The whispers grew louder until they seemed to surround him from every direction. Suddenly, his flashlight died. The darkness was absolute. Then, from somewhere ahead, he saw a pale figure standing between two trees. It looked exactly like the figure he had seen at the cabin. Michael ran without looking back. Branches tore at his clothes as he stumbled through the forest. Behind him, he heard footsteps matching his pace. Every time he slowed down, the footsteps slowed too. Every time he sped up, they came faster. He finally burst from the woods and reached the safety of his home. The following morning, police arrived with disturbing news. A hunter had discovered human remains deep inside the forest. Investigators later identified them as belonging to Rebecca Lawson, missing for 25 years. The discovery stunned the community. Her family finally received answers after decades of uncertainty. What nobody could explain was where the remains had been found. The location was less than 100 yards from the clearing where Michael and his friends claimed to have seen the mysterious cabin. Search teams had combed that exact area repeatedly over the years without finding anything. Some believed the remains had always been there and were somehow overlooked. Others suspected something far stranger. After Rebecca's remains were identified and properly buried, the strange events stopped. The whispers disappeared. The footprints never returned. The dog once again wandered freely near the woods. Life gradually returned to normal, and Michael eventually moved away. Years later, however, he returned to visit his parents. One evening, while standing on the porch, he looked toward the forest as darkness settled across the landscape. Everything seemed peaceful, until a cold wind drifted from the trees. For a brief moment, he thought he heard someone whisper his name. The sound was faint, almost lost in the wind, but it was enough to send a chill through his body. Michael immediately remembered the cabin, the photograph, and the pale figure watching from the doorway. He went inside, locked the door, and never spoke about that night again. To this day, locals still tell stories about the forest and the people who vanished there. Some believe the woods simply hide secrets well. Others believe something else walks between those trees after dark, waiting for curious souls to wander too far from the path.